Welcome to Millennials Are Killing Capitalism and East is a Podcast. Sina, you finally got it together. We finally got it together. I now want to talk about the Iranian war, but we're gonna combine the Kayfabe episode that we've been trying to do for like a month. Since the WWE,
like 2 months.
Yeah. Whenever we did WrestleMania on Imperial 80s, that was when we started talking about it.
Yeah.
And so we're going to do that. And we have a special guest today. So many of you probably know Kumars Salehi from Delete Your Account. One of the things I'll say quickly is that their podcast was one of the first ones that I was like listening to that was a, left-wing, anti-imperialists, Marxists influenced, kind of podcast. Way back in the days when shadowproof.com was like still a thing, and Roqayah like wrote for them a little bit and had a relationship with Brian and Kevin over there. And so yeah, I have to give them proper credit. They've been doing this for it'll be 10 years in a couple of months from now. And we've been doing millennials for 8, but yeah, Kumars, welcome. It's good to be with you, man.
It's wonderful to be with you. Thanks so much for having me, Jared. And yeah, it has been 10 years almost. And the show's changed a lot since those days. Everybody, I guess, has changed so much that it almost feels unrecognizable. A lot of the, I look back on those days. We could do a whole episode just on the sort of the moment of 2014, 2016, and how maybe that's going to be like our 60s and 70s for the generation that is going to become whatever we're going to become the boomers at some point. Maybe that'll be our 60s. And I would say, just to start, when Sina asked me to join this conversation about Kayfabe, and he brought it up in the context also of like being like P.T. Barnum is sort of the archetypal American hero in a way, right? Like, and I panicked because I realized that I know nothing about the circus. So I immediately found out that P.T. Barnum wrote a book called The Art of Money Getting. And I can quote from some of this, the highlights from some of this, but the full title is The Art of Money Getting, or The Golden Rules for Making Money. Came out in 1880. And I read this book and then I was like, okay, I think I understand the concept for this episode. So I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm kind of a mess right now, but we're gonna lock in.
Awesome. No, great. And yeah, I mean, just to your comment, like people sometimes say to us, oh, we just got into your podcast, I'm going to go back and listen from the beginning. And I'm like, please don't do that. Like,
don't do that for mine. Don't ever go back to the early days of my show, please. It's so painful. Don't ever
skip to at least 2020. Like, please, skip those early years or yeah, you'd be going through a lot of growing pains that you won't understand if you don't have context for them.
Yeah.
Between the three of us, we have almost 25 years of podcasting, or 20 years of podcasting. It's insane. Relative to other people who have done this, we are like ancient fossils of podcasting. That's so like funny because most podcasts die in like the first 6 months. And they certainly don't last years if they survive past that. So statistically speaking, we are like the 0.001% of podcasters who like stuck to it somehow. So yeah, it's fun. I always meant to have this episode too about podcasting on a Sunday afternoon, because I always wanted to I wanted to pick your guys' brains about how you've been doing stuff, because all of us took sort of different routes, I feel, in terms of like there's different ways. There's different ways you can pursue this, and it feels like that for whatever reason, like we took the route from ways, like I produce more shows than my own show. That's kind of been my way, is to kind of like do other shows. Whereas, like Jay is like a dedicated streamer to the point of like, it's almost like a religion almost. I think Jay has like a religious zeal to stream. It's amazing. And it's also, yeah. So I feel like, and you guys, but you can speak more to your own, but like, cause you've been around older too. Like you were there like a couple of years before me and Jay, I think. Because Jay, you and I are you started a little bit earlier than me, but Kumars, you're like 2 years, 3 years before us, I think.
Yeah, it was 2016. So June 1st, 2016 was our first episode that was published. And yeah, we didn't even have a guest on that one. It was just us. The second episode was with Mariam Kaba, which I don't want to get into at all, but I still love her, for the record. And she ended up being, along with Brett and Brian from Street Fight, which I also don't want to get into. You can tell how long we've been doing this. They were the most
Street Fight
experienced guests on our whole show. Like, that was the kind of eclectic mix of politics that we were in at the time. And like at this point, the show is is mostly based on what Roqayah is reporting on in South Lebanon and in the Dahiyah, and the show has changed a lot since she moved there. But also, obviously, we've all come to some different conclusions in the last few years than maybe we had in those days.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, we should do that episode, but I think we should do this episode for now. But I appreciate that, and also big shout out to the reporting that Roqayah is doing. Folks, if you're not like following her on Twitter or following Delete Your Account, like please do, because like crucial stuff, and from a trusted voice that could speak to you in English from Lebanon, like. It's a great service that she's doing, and that you all are doing. And
I will say, we now have a new contributor, Hadi Hotait, who was on the last episode with Roqayah. They just record locally there, and he's a video journalist and war reporter. You might know him from Free Palestine TV if you have seen that show on YouTube or on Twitter. Producer of Wartime Cafe with Laith Marouf, and also does his own investigative reporting. That's also an invaluable resource to have. So absolutely, for those of us who recognize that the Dahiyah, that South Lebanon are fronts in this war, the same as Palestine, the same as Iran. Roqayah is somebody who shares your perspective on it and has gone back there and is sort of putting herself on the line in ways that most of us would never dream of, frankly. And so I'm in awe of her, really.
100%. Absolutely. All right. So Kayfabe, Sina, why don't you kick this off? This is your baby, this episode. And so I'm going to let you start us off.
Yeah. So this is many of you will already know that I have a passion for 80s and 90s wrestling, early wrestling, that phase, sort of like the Hulkamania era, that sweet spot. And the reasons as to why this weird content, this pocket of content is like meaningful to me is whatever, but it's more that I realized as time has gone on that the shape and character of like American political, like imperial, kind of late imperial politics and culture, and just kind of like, whatever. Let's just stick to politics and culture. Is this kind of WWF, and I will always call it WWF, pro wrestling carnival.
What's the other one sort of that made them do it? The world
WWE.
No, but like what?
World Wildlife.
World Wildlife
Foundation.
Federation.
World Wildlife
Fund. See, we don't even
Fund
know.
Foundation. It's definitely a nonprofit. Yeah,
that's funny. Well, good for them. But you can
Like
still
an
call it
and
that.
it's like it's probably like an imperialist NGO though, if we're being honest. Like
Yes,
there's no
yeah,
way
it's
this
probably
is-
like a CIA cutout. Yeah, like everything. Yeah, so it was always the longer that this period, especially Trump won was kind of, and the lead up to Trump won was kind of, you sort of noticed that. I was living in the US at the time too, so I was kind of inside of it, but also because I have no like stake in American life. I was on a visa. I didn't really picture myself staying long term. So I always, like, even if my brain didn't say that explicitly, I kind of knew in my head. I was like, there's nothing here. So my relationship to the US the whole time was like, okay, this place is kind of weird. Like, it's not. And so like as that elevated and as the panic around Trump got more and more, I like sort of reached a fever pitch around his election, because I mean, I'm sure you guys all remember, everybody thought, like the normies thought, oh, this is unthinkable, this guy could never win. So the reason why I'm saying that is that like I noticed all of like the patterns of like Trump's character, and I was like, oh, this is just like this whole thing is like WWF. And like, this is just, there's a character. And then you realize that it's not like he himself is like a character out of WWF wrestling. And he is in fact part of it. Like they sort of, McMahon loves him. He made McMahon's wife, I think, Secretary of Education, possibly, I want to say. Yeah. So like,
she's
it's
our
not just
Secretary
like he himself.
of Education right now.
She's still? Oh yeah. Oh my God. So, but
Currently,
so
as
like
we are
there's a
speaking,
direct connection. Yeah, fucked up. I mean, and so it's like, so the fact that like he himself is wrapped up in this, he became insulated in the storylines because he himself became enamored with it. So the same way that he like rose, he rose to prominence through, what was the show? What was the fucking Apprentice? That this was kind of like a sort of precursor to that. I feel that understanding how the sort of carnivalesque nature of WWF, like the extremely carnivalesque, and not just like, because the thing is, it's not just like WWF, but it's the whole relationship that the consumers of it, viewers and fans of it, that they know it's not real. Like they know, like literally, this guy is not hitting another guy with a chair, but you like it anyways because it doesn't need to be real. But it doesn't need to be like they're harming themselves, because ultimately, like, that would make the sport even more destructive than it is now. Even as it's fake, it's still extremely violent and extremely destructive to like the workers themselves. But putting that aside, ultimately, the game of all of this is this concept of kayfabe, which, to my knowledge at least, is like the backward spelling of be fake. That it comes out of like the carnival world of.
Isn't that
and
Latin?
so.
Kinda?
Yes, yeah. It's like the joke. This is the joke among, it's like their own shibboleth, basically, that like carnies would like, this was like the law of understanding that like, oh, if you throw this ring toss game enough times, you'll eventually get it. It's not that it's rigged, right? Which it is rigged, but you don't let it on that it's rigged. So that's kind of like the metaphor I was starting to pick up. I was like, oh, this whole like US political system is this ridiculous series of like Matrushka, like kayfabes of like the normalcy of American life, like the normalcy of like American conquest, how like it just is normal to have erased a whole continent of people and supplanted yourself and then call yourself free, and then at the same time do violent segregation and slavery and then Jim Crow. Like, you know what I mean? Like the contradictions of American life are naked, but somehow you could say hundreds of millions of people, like maybe 100 million Americans or more, because not all Americans are like this. Not all Americans, listen to me. But at a social level, like a broad social level, there is this implicit kayfabe of like, yeah, we're a normal country. We're a normal country. We're just big. We're like freedom. And like, so that is like one level of like social kayfabe I noticed in the US, because you don't talk about empire. They don't show it conveniently, which makes that a lot easier. But you don't talk about it, like even the intellectual class doesn't talk about it. The media class certainly doesn't talk about it. Empire is just in the background, right? Like a whole ass genocide went by or is going on, and our class of like intellectual, the few who stood up and said anything at all were squashed like ants in public for everyone to like enjoy. Like, so this kind of, and then at the same time, Americans make their identity out of being able to say whatever they want. So these are, and then, so like beyond the actual like kayfabe-ness of Trump himself, that there is this also like, and like his carnival barkerness, the way that everything is a circus, like the circus-like nature of like political discussions, of like social dramas, of content itself, right? Like adding in a lot of insane amount of violence and sex. Like that's what American life feels like, an insanely violent, horny circus. And like this, and it would be funny. It would be like Chapo level funny to like riff on it, which is like how, speaking of 2016's, guys like Chapo, the Chapo guys rose to prominence because it's fun to talk about a clown, because a clown is fun to begin with, right? Like shit posting is fun, and Trump was the greatest shit poster to ever live. Like he could change our ability, like he could make us laugh, but also like enrage us and manipulate our feelings to the tune of hundreds of millions of people. And also you manipulate the media class itself into talking about him. So just this guy with his stupid phone and his deranged mind, like managed to do this, managed to like get this far. So it's so understanding kayfabe of like the like and how Trump in some ways breaks the liberal kayfabe in a way at the same time. So like Venezuela, like what the Venezuela operation is a huge break in kayfabe, in like how liberal imperialism is supposed to unfold. So this is what I want to sort of play around with today, to sort of like the fakeness of American life and the way everyone agrees, like, yeah, this is normal. This is very clear, very normal. That's my, I'm putting it out there.
Kumars, you did the reading, so PT Barnum the shit.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that my first question is like, trying to figure out Sina's angle here was like, what's like sort of typical about Barnum himself. And he was, in typical American fashion, somebody who profited off of the abuse, torture, mutilation, lifelong humiliation, and murder of, I mean, really, if we think, about the impact of all of the aforementioned things on people's lives, definitely murder of people who are marginalized, sick and disabled people, the cursory examination of like YouTube, explainers on Barnum, the dark side of P.T. Barnum, and like he wasn't all cool. American hero ? Are like mostly absorbed with particular case. There was a woman, I don't know if you've heard of this, Jared, or maybe Sina, but there was a woman, a Black woman who was enslaved, named Joyce Hett. And she was part of his exhibition of what he called George Washington's nurse, a 161-year-old woman who appeared to be toothless of old age, of insanely old age, when in fact he had actually just had her teeth surgically removed. She was blind, and so was functionally sort of his slave for this entire period of time that she lived in agony. And that's one really obviously like horrific, like if we want to think about maybe like the worst things that people have ever done, like when we think about what the Nazis did, he basically just did that out of sheer like American entrepreneurial spirit, and not even like some collective mentality that people sort of got behind. It was literally just like, well, this is what society in America has taught me to do, and he sort of presents himself that way. So we can talk about, like, obviously the legacy of the circus is, in my view, probably the most horrific when it comes to animals, and I'm a big animal rights guy, so like we can talk about that also. But I just wanted to share sort of like the level of kayfabe, if you will, the sort of gaslighting that he himself presents in his book, about, which is sort of, about how if you're just really sensible, you can save money and build wealth. He's sort of like was that guy Robert Kiyosaki? This is sort of like a Robert Kiyosaki style, like how to be a rich dude manual. I guess everything now is like a version of this genre, like all the Andrew Tates, everybody's like a dating and finance guru. But, this was some of the original stuff. And he gives obviously the most banal, truly vacuous insights that kind of just show that he is presenting also an image of himself as this kind of capitalist, this leading capitalist who understands the general kind of parameters of how one should operate in order to make money. And of course, he doesn't mention any of these other tactics, but I'm just going to read you guys a little quotation from the book. I'm going to be sparing and only read this one because it's truly something to behold. Quoting here, this is again from The Art of Money Getting, Golden Rules for something or other. I hold that every man should, like Cuvier, the French naturalist, thoroughly know his business. So proficient was he in the study of natural history that you might bring to him the bone or even a section of a bone of an animal which he had never seen described, and reasoning from analogy, he would be able to draw a picture of the object from which the bone had been taken, like, which is obviously already like nonsense, right? Like, according to the paleontology of the time. On one occasion, his students attempted to deceive him. They rolled one of their number in a cowskin and put him under the professor's table as a new specimen. When the philosopher came into the room, some of the students asked him what animal it was. Suddenly, the animal said, "I am the devil, and I'm going to eat you." It was but natural that Cuvier should desire to classify this creature, and examining it intently, he said, "Divided hoof, graminivorous, graminivorous? I should have practiced reading that word. It cannot be done." He knew that an animal with a split hoof must live upon grass and grain, that's what that means, or other kind of vegetation, and would not be inclined to eat flesh, dead or alive. So he considered himself perfectly safe. And the last line is the sort of the lesson of this: the possession of a perfect knowledge of your business is an absolute necessity in order to ensure success. So that's like a fortune cookie level insight tacked onto, I'm at this point, I'll cede the floor to you guys for any reactions to that. But by way of framing, I would just say that it's pretty remarkable that his example of like being an expert on something is somebody not being afraid. The question is clearly not like whether this could be the devil, but that if it were the devil, would the devil like eat people? And he concludes that, obviously famously, animals with cloven hooves not only are four-legged, but also, they eat, they don't eat people, unless I guess they're really mad or something, or whatever. But that seems to be the lesson, and it's just this completely fantastical story with the most banal moral at the end of it, borderline irrelevant. And I was just like, this was the book that was written by like a guy that people now think of as, the sort of, as Sina does, the sort of archetypal snake oil salesman who never really got exposed, never really faced accountability. And we still have people writing hagiographical literature about his life. It's pretty crazy.
It is fascinating. I mean, it also makes me think a little bit of Vince McMahon in all of this too. You know, there's a Netflix documentary on him, which was pretty funny because it's like I'm fairly convinced that Bill Simmons set out to do hagiography of McMahon. Like he wanted to create something that would really like talk about this interesting, and there's just so much like abuse, sexual scandals, like lawsuits, violence that like he really couldn't do strict hagiography, right? But it still manages to make the viewer, I think, somehow come away kind of in awe, right, of this person. And I was thinking about this in part because been reading Lenin's Imperialism in our study group, and like, what does Vince McMahon do? He like takes what is essentially a cartel, right, of wrestling. Like you have regional, you know, cartel where people don't kind of mess with each other's territory, and you guys have the Northeast and you guys take the South and you all go over here and do that. And he says, I'm gonna scoop up all the talent from all of you who I'm gonna get TV deals, I'm gonna get toys, I'm gonna get endorsements, I'm gonna blow this thing up, and I'm just gonna be able to basically buy up your talent and monopolize this thing. But he's so terrible, like on the labor front and everything else, that eventually you get somebody like Ted Turner to come along and say, well, I'll actually pay people. Like I'll move beyond like just the kind of celebrity status and, you know, being in toys and commercials and, you know, having to work 365 days a year and beat your bodies to shit and everything like that and pay people. So there's like so much, I mean, I guess like in way of crossover, right? It's like the abusiveness, the fakeness, the horrible labor conditions, right? There's all this racism embedded in all of this stuff. But like in McMahon, the way that he talks about the racism that's like embedded in, you know, the Iron Sheik or, you know, the Sergeant Slaughter or like whatever he's doing to like, you know, is, oh, I'm just reflecting. I'm just talking about what's going on within American society, like, and just distilling it down to a level that people want, right? And there is some like undeniable, to go back to your thing, Sina, like about the American people, they do want it, right? Like they desire the kayfabe, right? Which is, I think somebody asked again, what was kayfabe? If you missed the beginning, I mean, it is basically this idea of, you know, things being fake, but you have to sort of believe that they're true. So basically it's maintaining the illusions that stage storylines, predetermined wrestling matches, that these things are authentic and that wrestlers are actually the characters that they portray. And you're not supposed to break that, right? Like you're supposed to maintain these illusions for people, right? And I think that it is quite you know, quite a metaphor for like how US imperialism is shown within the United States on like a kind of mass media scale, right? Like it's like you watch any reporting right now of what's going on in the US war in Iran, it's like they're kind of like the one thing that they're a little bit frustrated with Trump about is that he does break kayfabe because he can't sort of keep a coherent story together, right? He can't say, well, this is why we're doing it, and we're going to do it until this happens, and you know, this is how we get there, right? It's like, well, maybe we'll do that. Maybe we've already won. Maybe we'll stop tomorrow. Maybe we'll go for a month. Like, you know, he can't like it. And so that's really the media's complaint right now is not like, why are we doing this? What are we doing? Like, you know, it's like, oh, gas prices are going up and I'm not sure what this guy's talking about right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a good metaphor. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead, QS.
I was going to say very briefly, it's a good metaphor for liberalism as well, just in the sense that, like, actually, this one final point on Barnum. They did I watched a CBS interview with a guy who wrote a recent biography, and the interviewer was also writing, telling him about some of this stuff and what do you think about it, and was he a racist, P.T. Barnum? And the guy says, well, he started out as one, and then before the guy can actually respond, the interviewer can actually respond like, and then it just cuts away and it's never really mentioned again. And so he just started out as one, and it almost reminds me of that joke of like the Mitch Hedberg joke where it's like I used to do drugs, I still do, but I used to too, and like that is obviously I think an admission on some level that like he never really stopped being racist, and they sort of merely allude to the idea that he changed without ever saying how multiple times, because that's again the limit of what can be said. Just like he can't write in his actual book, he has to make, he has to give these nonsense kind of fantastical anecdotes because he can't actually write in his book about how he got rich. And they describe him as in this same feature, again, CBS, like they describe him as this great advocate of freedom of speech. And their example is when one newspaper wouldn't print his opinion, he started his own, which again is like this beautiful metaphor for liberalism.
That's good. He's a podcaster.
Yeah, it's like his opinions, and I shudder to think what those opinions were, right? That like he couldn't even get published in a newspaper that normally prints capitalists' opinions whenever they want them printed. And that's just such a beautiful metaphor for like what people think freedom is, the ability to do whatever you want, and what it actually is in liberalism, which is the ability for rich people to do whatever you want.
Absolutely. Yeah, what were you going to say, Sina? You were going to jump in with something.
Yeah, no, to take it back to like how there's something else in all of this, which is a great American word from what I can tell. It's like a neologism for, I have to look it up to be sure, but grift and griftering. Like it's not just like Trump is not just like a master shit poster and not just like which is like a modern carnival barker in a way. But he's also like a master grifter. This guy can grift anyone. And obviously like the way he manipulates media is a key part of that grift. So the brand name Trump is what was what he was able to sort of use and like weaponize to build out his real estate empire. And so for me to like think of all this through, and also with the same with Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon's father was one of these kind of wrestling magnates who had his own kind of territory, and he watched his dad, learn from his dad, and then ruthlessly took over from all, like after he bought out his dad or something, or took over, he then took over the rest of the country. And so it's not even, and then even the story inside of that too, like growing the company and how it became what it was, and how it really is like built on this empire of skulls. Like in the same way, like Trump's empire is like an empire of skulls. Like there is a string of corpses, like in this guy's wake. Like there's a really good book I mentioned on the last episode. We promised you a great live event or something. It came out maybe last year, 2 years ago. It's a really well written, fun book about the history of wrestling, and there's like a lot of dark stuff. So one thing I did want to bring up in all this, which is like in terms of kayfabe and what it means to break kayfabe, is that there's a great story around the Iron Sheik, Hossein Khosrow Vaziri, about whom I wrote my first academic article. Don't look it up, you weirdos. Now that I said that, you're all going to look it up. Stop being weird. Don't Google my name. Stop looking up my dissertation. I see you people every month. You always do it. I tell you, every time I bring it up, I tell you not to do this, and then 10 people do it, and then the UC people email me, and they're like, ooh, 10 people looked it up. I know who you are, okay? I will hunt you down, Liam Neeson style. So I wrote an article about, what's his name, about this guy, because he's a fascinating character. And inside of his story, there is this weird, inside of his like biography as a wrestler, there is this funny anecdote that actually like played like a huge role in his career because it had like it had like consequences, which is he had this running feud going with Hacksaw Jim Duggan. You'll remember him. He carried around a piece of wood for no reason whatsoever, just to that was his thing. It was like his fetish object. Like, it made no sense. Like, what does the wood have to do with America? Other cultures have 2x4s. This is not an American thing.
Because he's Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Sina, come on. Like, you want him an axe? Or he needs a hacksaw? The wood.
Actually, why doesn't he have a hacksaw? Is that just against the rules of wrestling? Is that what the problem would be?
I think it would be. If you're using it as a prop, it would be more potentially dangerous, right?
That's true.
I think we're pushing a little too hard on the WWF writers. They weren't thinking this hard about the name. They were like, that sounds good. Why not? But the funny story is they had this feud going, and what happens? They also the thing about wrestlers is that they also all love cocaine, and they were in the car, and they're also co-workers, so they were like on their way in a car going to a wrestling match, and there they are caught by the police with cocaine, the two of them who were supposed to be in like a racial blood feud, because that's also the story of the Iron Sheik, is that they kind of brought him up when the revolution happened. They were like, oh, Iran is the big bad enemy, so it's very crude, his own rise. But then in the midst of all of this, the story goes viral that like, oh my God, these two are supposed to hate each other. Like, we caught you. So they broke kayfabe, but accidentally. So then they both got fired. Of course, they like had, so then he wandered the will. I know way too much about this guy. I'm embarrassed. And he's sad. And so the only thing you really should know about him is that all those tweets he was sending were all fake. He was illiterate. He admitted it once in like an interview. People just very cynically like used his name. It's very awful, actually. These two Iranian guys actually in Toronto. Can you believe it? And they basically got a hold of him, claimed that he's their uncle or some bullshit. I mean, no one even knows them anymore. And the whole thing is, that's why he's like still tweeting from his grave. So it's like just despicable shit. But you can tell he just got grifted himself by the end. But like, it's just like this. Anyways, his own story inside of this is partly breaking kayfabe. And then guess what happens? He comes back after like a, convalescence in nowhere. He comes back and then he reinserts himself like in the early 90s as Colonel Mustafa. So inside of like, which is like an Iraqi thing, because one of his former mortal enemies, Sergeant Slaughter, who was like this American militarist type, he then did like what's called a heel turn. I'm so embarrassed. I know all of this stuff. This is so shameful. Like, if my ancestors heard this, they were like, "This is what you do with your life, buddy. This is what you did a PhD for, so you could have this encyclopedic knowledge of this stupid shit." But I guess the root of all this is to say is that his own personal life and his own like personal story got so fucked up and kayfabed into himself, so that he invented all these stories of like, oh, I was a bodyguard for the Shah, I was like a whatever, and like you can tell that he himself didn't, like, he lost his own identity inside of this kayfabe, which actually is like a big story of like Iranian Americans, as we're watching right now, is like they kayfabe as white people. They think they are white people, but they are not white people unless they utter like fascistic, like imperialist, like foreign policy against Iran. Then they get inducted into this, oh, okay, now you're Americans. Now you get to kayfabe. Now you get to be as one of us. So anyways, all of this is say like he's a strange character. What's his Khosrow Vaziri. I see Nima Shirazi in the chat. Nima, speaking of old podcasting kings, he should be here. Wow, so many Iranians in podcasting.
Listen, if you want to drop a link to Nima,
come.
Nima is definitely welcome.
Nima, come. I'm gonna text you a link, Nima, if you want to come. Just let us know, and I'll DM you. But so yeah, this is this thing of this guy himself, and then sort of zooming out around like wrestling in general. WWE is a key. Trump, his own kind of weird inability to tell. There's a famous story about Trump not knowing that something was fake. Like something about, maybe someone in the chat knows about this, but I remember seeing a tweet to this effect that he thought there was something about a car explosion of a car. There was like a story inside of this in like the 2000s. I wasn't watching, but basically he like later he watched it, thought it was real, and then called Vince McMahon the next day. He's like, whoa, what the hell happened? He's like, it's not real, Donald. Like he didn't, like Donald Trump being like the ultimate kayfaber himself is also a mark. So that's the other term in all of this, is a mark is someone who doesn't know that this is a fake. That like even inside of this kayfabing, which you pretend not to know, which is kind of like Tarofing in a way, its own weird inverse Tarofing, Kumars, of like, oh, come to it's an Iranian thing of like pretending to like be a certain way and then not really, but it's deeper than that, this kayfabe. But even inside of this weird broken kayfabe identity making of Americans, like I think to finish this point, I think this is like a key to understanding of like how this guy rose, how we got this far in his like presidency, where this extremely unpopular guy who keeps actively harming American people's lives, like their own personal interests. Forget the moral duty to not be like a global empire. Forget that. But this guy actively harms like hundreds of millions and many of his own base, and they love him for it. So there's like so these are marks. Like Americans are also like the ultimate marks in all of this. So that's my brain dump. Thank you very much.
I just want to say I have not forgotten. Your ancestors will forgive you, Sina. I promise, if you explain what happened with Sergeant Slaughter's heel turn, because I've not forgotten about that, and I'm very curious. But yeah, I would also just very briefly say that if anybody, my instinct might be to push back on some of the framing in this episode, but I will say that the first instance of that is probably that I don't think it's entirely unreasonable that like a diaspora population would come to the conclusion that like assimilation to whiteness or quasi-white status in America is achievable through sheer racism against other people or your own group. Like I think that's actually a very rational conclusion to come to, but I'll leave it at that because I don't want to cut off Jared's point either.
No, I think that's a good point, and I think it's kind of one of the where I kind of wanted to go is this idea, the being the mark, right? And like that actually, I mean, if we're talking about wrestling as an example, but I think this is also true for imperialism within the United States context. It's that people want to believe, right? And so you go to wrestling knowing that the audience does know that this, I mean, maybe not little kids, but certainly their parents, right? They know that this stuff is predetermined. They know what kayfabe is. They know that it's a carnival show, in a certain way. And they know that a lot of the violence that they're going to see is fake, even though because it's such a brutal sport, even with them, like, they're still throwing each other. They're still like people are getting hurt, right, constantly within it. But that still a lot of it is performance, and a lot of it is pulling your punches and all that kind of shit. And yet there's a desire for that, and a desire to believe, and a desire for these storylines. And a lot of times within wrestling, those storylines, connect. I mean, we did WrestleMania 1 on Imperial 80s, right? And like right in that is the Iron Sheik, right in that is like these, booing at Iran and the USSR as as a tag team, right? In that particular 1985 WrestleMania, right?
That's multipolarity. They were already way ahead of us.
Unfortunately, the USSR did not back Iran.
Exactly.
But within that, right? This is also, I think, why it resonates in discussing something like U.S. imperialism, because I think people, like the media class is a good example of it, but everyday people like are just, they just want to be given some justification. Like they're looking for the lie that they can believe in, essentially. Like a lot of people. And I'm not saying it's like this is everybody, again, like, but I do think that there is a large segment of the population that's just sort of like in a very typical, like we are, what is it? There's heels, and what are the other ones? Faces? Is that right? Yeah, Sina?
Baby face. They say baby
Baby
face and
faces.
heel.
Yeah. So I mean, the U.S. empire is the baby face to a lot of this population, and they're just looking around. Like if we're attacking somebody, they have to be a heel, and a part of being a heel is like this ridiculous kind of over the top propagandizing, right, around this person being just evil and an enemy and like uniquely just bad, and I think that that's it there's something psychologically, I think, that does resonate with what it means to be, in empire, in a certain way. And maybe, I don't know, I mean, I'm interested in like, do other societies have similar things? I mean, I imagine there is always like, there are national mythologies and stuff like that, but is there something unique about like something like WWF or PT Barnum within the US that you wouldn't find other places?
I mean, my immediate answer is it's not unique, actually, because um, if you, I don't want to necessarily universalize this, but if we sort of limit it to the European, Euro-American kind of space, the Western world, Christianate societies in Europe and settler colonies, then there's definitely, I think, since the Enlightenment and since like the advent of modernity, there's definitely been a drive towards myth. There's definitely been a sort of a reactionary tendency that's oftentimes manifested in right-wing politics, but a lot of times has manifested in just a sort of a very mainstream relationship to culture, to individual satisfaction and the ideologies surrounding it, to consumption in later stages of capitalism. But also, this is all very cynical at the end of the day, without an overarching kind of structuring set of beliefs or a horizon that can give people's lives meaning and tell them, this is what the world means. This is what you mean in it, and it's okay that way. I think that the most important kind of example of this is actually probably in Germany, and just as much as in the United States, where, I mean, this is my area of study also, but I think in a large capacity, Germany is the culture that in Europe channeled this reactionary sentiment the most, that saw itself as representing continuity with the Middle Ages, or even with a pre-medieval identity, in a way that stood against the secularizing effects of the Enlightenment. And I want to also go back to what Jared said about the idea that like people sort of need to believe that the horizons structuring their reality, that like the things that make up their worldview are true. And that's always going to lead them to find certainty where actually there's, according to the way we largely understand the world today, always going to be ambiguity, never an absolute truth. And yeah, I can go into specific examples of that. Like, this is basically Nietzsche's whole idea of truth. And I think in a way, like a lot of today's right is very Nietzschean, and a lot of our world is very Nietzschean in the way that we just see truth as a manifestation of power relations rather than something that's like actually concretely connected to an underlying reality. But yeah, I also want to throw it back to Sina for a second because I've been rambling.
Oh, those are good rambles.
No, we love it. There's a fantastic comment that this earlier that we're gonna get on the screen. I think Jay, you can find it if you can. He said the joke's on us. It was by Kevin Dunn, I think. Where is it? Joke's on all of us. Wrestling was always more real than the news. So this is also like this is the kayfabe like that's like most devastating to I think our lives, that like this. And I've always felt this way too, of like the manufacture of Iran as this mortal enemy to the US, and like the kayfabing around like Iran's like imminent mortal threat, which, yeah, in a general way, Iran is a threat to the US empire, as proved by the last 11 days, that it's like simply undone the US empire's military and like financial infrastructure and security infrastructure in 11 days. That like a buildup that took like 30 years is going to be useless in like a short while. So Iran is a threat, but the whole thing of the kayfabe around Iran fundamentally is that Americans pretend like they haven't been waging war on Iran for 47 years directly, and then prior to that waging like underground, like imperialist, like great game warring around. Like that's the thing. Like the concept of war itself is part of like not happening until it's like tanks and whatever. That's part of like American kayfabe of like the political identity. It's like, oh, okay, no, it was in a war before whatever date it started. It's a war now. It's like a war now. But it's like all of those warlike actions that preceded this for decades get erased because that's just the power of the American mind, kayfabe in mind. Like they can, like, again, I will always bring this up until the day I die. They almost murdered a bunch of kids at UCLA, and it didn't even like flicker in the American imagination. The same boomers who like made immense amount of like cultural production around Kent State, they had a whole freaking violent pogrom on UCLA campus against these defenseless teenagers and like 20-year-olds. And it didn't even break any concern. One person got arrested, one person got charged, I think, and he fled to the ethno-state to do more crimes. Like this is not like, that's a kayfabe that like, oh, so you're a lawless country, right? Oh, so you're like an ultimately lawless country that will sacrifice its own youth upon the altar of like Zio-fascism. Is that what you're telling me? Like your stupid fucking cops will sit like that as these kids get beaten with fucking sticks and batons and like, pepper sprayed fireworks, like things that had they inflicted that on their enemies, they would have had like the FBI on them before they even lifted a finger. Like this is not normal. Like this is not a normal set of circumstances. Like, so the kayfabe of American life right now since October 7th is like, what genocide? What genocide? Like the depths of it, guys, are like, this war has brought it out. Like in my own family, I have people who are reposting genocide like propaganda for like basically like a letter from inside Iran that says nothing is worse than the Islamic Republic. So people, they have Iranians saying that a genocidal and ecological nightmare which is unfolding in Iran right now, like the nature of their attack, right? It's going after people's way of living. That is better than the current government. I mean, this level of Iran derangement syndrome, like I can never speak to these people again. Like, thankfully they don't watch the show, so they'll never find out. But I'm like this is disgusting. Like fascism is real. like as if I'm telling you guys that, as if you don't know, but there is a global fascism. It is angry, it is mean, it is vicious, it is deeply Zionist, deeply, profoundly Zionist. Like Zionism is a vanguard of global fascism today, and one of its kind of bases of operation, main operating bases, like in terms of media, in terms of ideological kind of guidance, right? Like fascists go to Israel because they like it. It impresses them. But the weird thing about our fascists, they're also anti-Jewish. So like this plugs this, like their brains can't hold it together. Like racialism, like the racial segregation is not like arrangement of the American WASP brain can't like admits that the ethno-state of Israel is something that they would love to achieve, that they could just be like racially supremacists and make it their whole personality, which is like what they do. But the fact that these people that they consider to be underneath them, right, because they're anti-Jewish, are doing it way better than they're in their own country, confuses them, and you either get like a weird Tucker Carlson like whatever break from the American imperialism, which is a minority, or really you then get like the toilet paper USA naked cheap Zionism, which is like taking over. But at the end of the day, like this kayfabe of like what genocide is not just like rightoids. It's the whole, it's like huge mass of people in the country. Like they're just, this is something that kills me. Like, why don't people care? Like why, like what, like this sociopathic, this geopolitical sociopathy is like a product of kayfabe in some ways, of like the American kayfabe. They're like, oh, it's fine. This is normal. Like, I don't know. But why don't people care? I ask you.
I'll let Q Mars answer that. Let me say something quickly though to something else that you said, because I think what's interesting, particularly in one of the things that you say, is that while I don't agree with their worldviews or their politics or a lot of the like conclusions and things, like I actually find right-wing media way more interesting at this point in history than I find liberal media, because it's at least trying to understand through their distorted, fucked up racist lenses and everything else, like what is going on and who, you know, is to blame for certain things, and like who's, you know, whereas like the liberal media is just like, well, the price of gas is going up, but we sure hate Iran. Like that's, I mean, you know, or like, you know, oh gosh, like we should get maybe some humanitarian aid into Gaza, but like we can't stop sending bombs. Like, you know, so it's just like, it's actually more dumbed down and accepting of this, of like, it actually wants to do the work for Trump of upholding the kayfabe. And its only frustration is that that is difficult for them sometimes, right? Whereas at least as much as I am in no way endorsing, you know, whether it's Tucker or Candace Owens or any of these, you know, freakazoids on the far right, like there's at least some level of inquiry, questioning, challenging of different things coming out of that sector from a very specific, you know, viewpoint. I think quite cynical, right? Quite trying to like recognize, hey, a lot of the people are against this stuff, and if we don't have media that pretends as though, I think it's its own version of kayfabe, right? Like if we don't have media that pretends that we also care about some of these things, then we're going to lose people. But at least it's something. Like there's like the liberal, and that goes, you know, liberal left, but just also like center, you know, kind of was I mean, CBS is fucking owned by like the wealthiest Zionist in the world, right? But like, you know, all of these outlets, whether it's NBC, ABC, etc., like there is nothing there that you're going to find at all that would lead you, you know, in any kind of space of inquiry. Like another example just to bring in is Epstein, right? Like the liberal media has no interest really in the story. I mean, they had to do a report yesterday I saw, because they're actually like some police department is like looking at one of his ranches in New Mexico finally, that he supposedly buried people like 40 years ago or whatever, right? Like, and it's like, I mean, I don't think anything's going to come out of that, but it's just, they're like, oh, we got to report on this, but there's like there's no discussion, no analysis. Like, it is this big, huge, limited hangout of this stuff, but it's like there's no investigation into it at all, like from a journalistic perspective.
I definitely have a lot to contribute. Maybe not necessarily. I mean, the Epstein thing is its own conversation that we can get to. But what Sina mentioned about, I mean, his own family. I'm in a similar position. I have a cousin who actually grew up in Iran. I mean, I have an uncle you could say the same thing about, who's just like basically repeating. I mean, not basically, like literally just repeating the worst propaganda, talking about how she has family in Iran and she doesn't care, they should still bomb, and like commenting this under like publications like CNN and shit or whatever. Just like BBC does like an article about it, and she's like, don't stop bombing, whatever. Although I haven't seen that in a couple of days. I've kind of been hesitant to check Facebook as a result. I then have an uncle who's in Miami who's just like been like on the Trump to anti-Semitism pipeline for a while now. Although, who knows really how far back it goes. He's one of those people that was like a libertarian and then like immediately became a fascist as soon as that became more acceptable. But that is really hard to separate also from the idea of like performance, and like this is very clearly a performance for people, to be like, fuck Khamenei, I know I have families in Iran, but and like this is a whole performance, and it's a one that's very specifically in some of the videos you can see people reacting to Khamenei's death, for example. People very clearly performing for an imagined sort of audience in the absolutely outrageous level of shrieking and just the general kind of meltdowns that people are having, celebrating. It's very obviously meant to influence an idea of what's going on in Iran that doesn't have any specific relationship to what's actually happening there. And there's, I think, a different question also here about the extent to which people, as Sina asked, like, why do people not care? Or like, I guess another way of thinking about that is like, why do people willingly become marks? And I guess that does go back, I think, to, I do interpret this in some ways through sort of conservative German social theory, that people really do, after the so-called death of God, like feel like something magical and essential has been lost by, the Enlightenment and its sense of scientific and rational explanations for the world, the sort of the demythologization of society, replacing, in other words, myth with other less authoritative horizons. And again, I do think that it's important that people, including the people that are the perpetrators of some of the worst hypocrisy, some of the worst crimes, guilty of the worst kayfabe, they themselves become marks precisely for this reason, that people generally do need to believe that their worldviews are rooted in ideas that are true. And today's ideas, today's dominant structuring ideologies no longer effectively anchor people in a sense that their life has meaning without being equal or without being an individual, which of course means so many different things that it either means everyone ends up being the same, or everyone's resentful that they don't have, what other people have, because that bourgeois individualism is our horizon. There's, an interesting, less talked about text from Adorno. Actually, it was sort of his professional dissertation. They have a different name for it there. Habilitationsschrift, where it was actually about Kierkegaard, and it's a veiled critique of Heidegger, but it's basically a critique of this whole tradition, this whole romantic conservative tradition in continental philosophy. Obviously, Kierkegaard was Danish, but he's largely sort of active in these German-speaking spheres. And it was actually published just sort of by coincidence on the day that Hitler was inaugurated. So sort of an additional bit of irony there. And when he talks about this idea of, like, people know this from existentialism, also this idea that, like, it doesn't really matter what you choose as long as you choose. That's the most important thing, sort of subjective decisionism. The idea of formal freedom, individual freedom, is really kind of a subjective isolation, actually. It's a turning away from the actual world, even because it feels hostile, because it feels topsy-turvy, because it doesn't actually give you a sense of where you belong and where you fit into it. Kierkegaard was like an aristocrat. He was a rentier, as they called it. So he didn't even really have a role in this new society based on production and market exchange. There was a sort of there's a sort of a sense in Kierkegaard, and I think in other existentialism, that the self is a refuge from how absurd and paradoxical and unfair existence can seem in modernity. And it's in yourself, your subjectivity, your individualism, that you can recover some kind of personal choice. And that's what subjective self-determination really means. That's what individual freedom really means, and it is still possible. And Adorno it draws an analogy between this, like, interiority, the sort of attempt to seal yourself off from the consciousness of historical truth, trying to understand things rationally, trying to understand really what's going on, have a materialist analysis, as we might say today. Instead, you sort of revert to myth. And he uses the motif of the interior of an apartment that's sort of like historically and socially determined in the 19th century as a decorated space, a space outside of the home, outside of the, the market, and a space where you can sort of just be natural and to be yourself. And this drive to re-enchant the world, to then treat whatever comes from your own sense of, oh, well, this is just me. This is tabula rasa. I choose. I'm an individual. Whatever's been naturalized, whether you're aware of it or not, that is the new myth that you believe in. And so Nietzsche, when I know I'm kind of tying together a lot of strands. This is sort of what I write about, so it's all part of a big picture to me. But when Nietzsche says truth is just a kind of a function of power relations, he's not saying that there is ultimately a truth that is real, that's not a function of power relations, that we can actually get to, or that it doesn't matter what truth we pretend is real. In fact, he says truth isn't really better than lying, actually, if the lie is useful for life. And so he talks about how we need a new noble lie, taking it from Plato, to give people's lives meaning, now that the sort of the good part of Christianity, the part that kept the majority of people in their place, is gone. And now we have the bad part, which is egalitarianism, times 10, basically, with socialism and feminism. And so the idea for Nietzsche that we need to find under new masks, new mythologies becomes a pretty central motif. If you've heard of the Übermensch is just where he ends up after he realizes that none of the existing figures in mythology from Greek mythology, which he considered kind of, because it wasn't woke, it was still a better reference point. He thinks about Wagner's experimentation with it, sort of a de-Christianized, I guess, Middle Ages in his work. If familiar with Wagner, he does a lot of his characters are like Norse gods and stuff. So he's very determined to say there's a system of interpreting the world that we can return to that's deeply German and not Latin. And over the course of his life, Nietzsche goes from seeing like Dionysus, who had cults that were like, drunken murder cults back in ancient Greece, and like there were literal serial killers who would like who were like fanboys of Dionysus and would like kill and dedicate their murders to him. And Nietzsche obviously knew this, but he goes from thinking that maybe that's a nice way of representing the kind of values that would turn back the tide of modernity to at the end deciding, after deciding that Zoroaster, or what we call Zarathustra in Persian, or Zarathustra, it was a nice mask, but really he, if you've read that book, he just kind of makes Zarathustra the opposite of Jesus, and whatever Jesus would do, Zarathustra does the opposite, basically. And then at the end, he says, no, actually, none of these guys are actually what I want to see. Even Napoleon, even Cesare Borgia, who was the sort of the inspiration for Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. All of these dudes, they were pretty close, but the Overman, or the Übermensch that I want to see, that's completely free of all of this modern egalitarian nonsense, that has not even come yet. And there is this transition that does take place between him still looking at older mythologies and trying to put together a new way of telling people, here is your place. It's not the same as other people's place, because this is what society's structure is rooted in. It's not divine anymore, but it's something better. Maybe it's natural. And that's also something we could get into. I'll probably just cut it off there, but I will say that this all happened at a time when people were Nietzsche viewed sort of egalitarianism as unnatural. And so when we learn from Darwin that a given thing in nature is the way that it is because it works, he looks at all these hierarchies being taken apart, being replaced with worse things. His point has to be, his actual kayfabe is that the way that things were is actually more natural, that the society that is unequal, that is based on a truer assessment of relative power relations than in liberal modernity, that is a more natural order, and that what we think is broken from our woke, sensitive, soy, modern perspective, injustice, people being weak, people needing help, is actually something that's already been optimized. Just like Darwin taught us, if we don't like an animal or we think it's stupid, like the sunfish, for example, that actually there's a point to it, that it can't really move. And if you know anything about sunfish, shout out to sunfish. But it's definitely one of those paradigmatic examples that showed me that not only is Germany the sort of the second paradigmatic nation of modernity, along with the United States, like they were the other contender and very clearly shot their shot. They also represent some of the very same tendencies that we have in the United States, just from a completely different relationship to like the feudal Middle Ages. At the end of the day, though, we just manufactured a high-tech version of the pantheon of gods that for German society still had some relationship to, older belief systems and pre-modern traditions. My hesitation in making that distinction is that I actually think we might probably be headed in more and more of that direction as we go along in the direction of everything being high tech. We're sort of this is my version of the Varoufakis neo-feudalism thesis. Is I think there's something ideologically appealing about these older mythological feudal ways of viewing the world that are also based in the value of playing make-believe.
I appreciate that. That was great, Kumars. Yeah, thank you. Sina, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm still wrestling with that. That was a lot. I feel like, I guess I'm trying to figure out I'm just trying to figure out the sort of suburban character of like American Ubermensch, because like it's that tweet of like, what's the thing? Like, I am from Scottsdale, Arizona. I eat rice and beans or like beef and rice every day, or beef and corn every day. And I wear a Titliest hat or whatever Titleist hat. And Iran is my worst nightmare. It's like it's a great tweet. I got to find it somewhere. But yeah, that's the suburban aspect of all of this. Like it's just, I can't get over it. How just parochial American imperialism is, how like incredibly vile it is. The characters who like support it are so incredible. Like fucking Pete Hegseth, like should not, like this is, okay, here's my question about Hegseth. And maybe we have like military people in the chat. I doubt it, but who knows? But like, isn't it humiliating for like actual American professionals to see all this stuff, to like see all your like, imperial glory go up in like a puff of fucking smoke from a Shahed 136? Like, where is the American, like not deep state, but there's surely people like disagree with this. Surely people like inside these institutions. But then I said this to Nick and he brought up a good point. He's like, dude, these people all work for the same military industrial complex. Like they don't care. They're just there to make money. And it's like, oh, it's the P.T. Barnum thing, like how to make money. And American military is, and like to go up the military route, you either do it to like make money or it becomes a political, like a route to politics. Because you like join the military, you're like a whatever, silver spoon. Bush did it. Like tons of American politicians do that way. And like every 4 years, there's like a whole crop of them that pop up. A few of them run for president. And it's like a whole thing. It's like a game. But like but other countries also have like strong militaries. And this kind of stuff does not happen. Like you don't have Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers become the like most powerful guy. Like you don't have can we just talk about 9/11? I need to go back to this. Like you don't, like the ultimate kayfabe of 9/11 of like, wait a minute. So a country that has like hundreds of fighter jets can't chase down a slow moving plane that is headed towards your military headquarters and you just let it crash and there's no parts or debris of a plane there. Like, and you're supposed to believe it was a plane. You're supposed to believe that 2 planes hitting 2 buildings took down 3 buildings. Like this is a mark. Like Americans are marks for believing this stuff. Like they are marks if they believe it. But it's easier to be a mark than to be a fascist openly. However, this is where I want to go with this. Look at the ethno-state. Look at Zio. Look at the Zios. They break kayfabe gleefully. They're like, oh no, we're racially superior. Like, oh no, you're under. Like, oh, you're this underclass. Like, oh, we are good people. Like, you are bad people. You are Amalek. Like, all of the kayfabe of liberalism out the window. Like, completely no issue whatsoever. And yet, their partisans here maintain their own insane inverse kayfabe, which is we, the racism people in chief, are actually the victims of racism par excellence. So like we have these dueling Zionist kayfabes that we're like underneath, which is like watch us as we genocide you, film ourselves doing it, show ourselves being the cruelest people possible to unite our own base, but at the same time we're going to have our advocates outside of the country accuse you of racism when you point any of this out. So like part of this too of like this insanity is like the back and forth between kayfabe and non-kayfabe of like breaking your brain. And I think that's the key to understand, one of the keys to understanding like the sort of eternally propagandized nature of like the average American. I will say it again, like maybe the three most like propagandized people on the planet: Americans number one, Zionist Jews number two, and Iranian American, and like Iranian diaspora / Iranians inside the country. I really think in terms of like pound for pound media, there's nothing that comes close. Nothing. Maybe you can make an argument for Ukrainians now, but that's new. Like Iranian, like the Iranian propaganda machine. Like think about this. People who don't know this, in like the 90s and stuff, before the internet, you had the same class of Iranian monarchist grifters, media grifters, but they were all on satellite TV being beamed into the country, okay? So like, but where the fuck did they get this money from? It would cost probably tens of thousands of dollars to rent time on a satellite dish in those days. There was no Patreon back then. Somebody was clearly dark funding this shit. So like, that's just like one phase of it. Imagine now where you have every loony, freaking psycho fascist Iranian getting their own platform, being highlighted by Zionist platforms. You even have freaking the psychotic Emily Schrader on CNN, an actual fascist, actual human fascist, like utter, like just goon representing Iranians. I mean, I tweeted this like around the middle of I think it was like early January, and I was like, I've never felt this level of Iran propaganda. This is totally new. And I've lived through fucking Women Life Zionism, okay? That was insane. Women Life Zionism was insane, okay? 350 million tweets, okay? Like, God could not tweet this much herself if she tried, okay? For some, like, it was a machine. If you remember, like, the farcical nature, like, there's a fucking kayfabe. A woman dies in police custody in Iran. Literally a daily occurrence across the U.S. People die at the hands of police across the U.S. And then you have this 3-month-long mourning of this woman you've never met, and her as an allegory for understanding the larger trauma of Iranian women against this unjust. I mean, it was insane. It was actually insane. Like, this is not normal, right? Like, to have all of this fucking bullshit sprayed on tens of millions of people. And then remember, people outside of the US watch US media. So they can reach into the whole planet, convince you that Iranians are overthrowing their government, right? That they can convince you. And then, like, stage this insane murder fest to cover up what was obviously a coup. And then when it fails, they just like, okay, we're not talking about that anymore. Sorry. Like this case, like that, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being an Iranian guy where like everything about us matters and is the key to understanding everything. Maybe I'm just like being an Iranian uncle, but like getting a grip around American Zionist, right? Because that's why it makes it so powerful. Zio-American like nature of it gives it this incredible viciousness. And here's something else too that I want to do this episode with my friend Ali Zadeh. Iranian media, the opposition media, it's a rare example of oppositional media. Like, it's actually oppositional, and it's actually very effective because, as I've come to learn, they can convince Iranians inside the country that, like, oh, the people trying to genocide you and doing ecological terrorism, they're there to liberate you from these bad guys. And, like, probably millions of Iranians believe that at this point. Like, that is something that we're going to have to think about forever to like, how could we have gotten this far that we allow our enemies to convince so many of our people to help them, right? Now, I will take that back and say not enough Iranians did that to make their January plan work. It didn't turn out to be like Syria, that like not enough of them joined, that when the Iranian state made like a very serious statement that like after the first night, which they didn't have live ammunition. So remember that when they tell you 90 quadrillion people were mowed down, the first night they didn't even have live ammunition. It was the second night. But like when they tell you that, oh, this regime, this and that, like they are laying the groundwork for what we're seeing now. Like they're legitimizing it. But Iranians resisted that when it became clear to the majority of them that this was not some sort of articulation of national sentiment, that it was actually very dastardly action on the part of dark actors manipulating and also utilizing very real rage against the government, which I don't water down at all and I don't deny. But to turn rage to the let's say crystallization of political rage, which is normal, which every country has, into extreme political violence, that is something that is where like I turned around and I was like, okay, this is weird, this is not normal. And the media frenzy around this last and the lead up to all this, like it's been, I'll be real with you guys, like January and February were rough. Like I was like, because I kept waiting for it. I kept waiting, like what's happening? Like what are they waiting for? And like they themselves wanted to start it earlier, and it didn't work out. Like we are at like various stages of it not working out right very now. Like it is not working out for them in the way they managed this was way to go, and that's what makes me worry. So desperately. Like they even tried a Venezuela scenario and all this that they don't report on. There was like a commando operation on Khamenei's property that like it's called Beit Rahmat, like the house of the leader, that compound. There was this like large scale operation to try to kidnap him and to get him and they failed miserably. And because it's not reported here, it's hushed up. I come off sounding like a conspiracoid, tinfoil hat here. And so like part of the difficulty in all this too is like communicating to people some like basic elements of all this that like don't get shared here. And I don't know, I guess I'll end with this. Like, if you can find, I'll try to look for it, but it's from Breakthrough News. Like, they went to that protest outside in LA somewhere, and all of these, like, mouth-frothing loser Iranians who obviously, like, are just, like, spouting the various numbers, like 10,000, 30,000, 90,000. Like, they have no clue. So
yeah, it's the Kay Pritzker has it's a video where he's interviewing a bunch of folks from
it's Gray Zone also, I think.
Yeah, it's Gray Zone. Yeah, it's a Gray Zone, right? Sorry guys. But and I realized that like it's to have gotten to this scale, like just betrays an incredibly violent media apparatus that feeds upon comprador voices amplified by bots, and then and then legitimated through respectable media like BBC Persian, right? Like that has the BBC stamp of appeal on it. But like Imperialism Today and its info war against Iranians, unless you're like in it and you see it, it's staggering. I mean, I'm sure Syrians will probably tell you the same thing. But just the level of media indoctrination, the warfare, and we'll never recover. Like I'll never speak to my cousins again. I'll never do that. I'll never talk to them again. Like we're done. I'm never going to visit them. I'm never going to see them. I'm not going to communicate with them. Like these are traitors. These are traitors who are helping our enemy. Now, does one of them want to confront me and talk about it? Hell yeah, I'll still do that. But like there's no saving these people. Americans are lost. And Iranian Americans are Americans first. That's like the important thing. Like they are Americans 100%. So I don't know. We are so far behind the fucking ideological 8-ball because like we can't reach the levels that they can. We can't infiltrate like their brainwaves. We'll never compete with BBC Persian, Iran International. We'll never do that. It's just, I don't know, but that's my bleak assessment for the moment.
I mean, I think it's worth acknowledging the scale of that problem for sure. Like, it is staggering. Sina knows, if you guys have Iranian friends in the diaspora, you know that in English or Persian, the number of people who will refrain from referring to the government of Iran as the regime is going to be very low. Like the sort of standard position of I think diaspora Iranians is that the government of Iran, the Islamic Republic, is illegitimate, and that it would be good if it no longer existed. Now, Sina and I obviously like are exceptions in the sense that like we sort of fundamentally disagree with that. Like at the very least, I do. Maybe we can sort of discuss that also in a different venue. But the discussion then is just about, okay, so this necessary thing that we all think would be good if it happened, what's the best way to get there? Oh, I guess, war is definitely not the best way. It doesn't make us feel good. And it's counterproductive according to, some calculation there, pick your calculation. It doesn't really make sense from a lot of people's perspectives, even if you do want a new government there. But that's something that comes from, in some ways, the uniqueness of the Islamic Revolution, but also the media environment that Sina is talking about that really does make it so that, Iran is, I never really thought about this until recently in this particular way, but like Iran is the semi-colony of the United States and the UK during that time also before of the Shah. I learned recently that more Iranians died in World War I than any other nationality, which is insane because they were a neutral country, but actually that's exactly why. Everyone just kind of decided that they were the territory that had to be secured, that it couldn't afford to really be neutral in World War II as well. And I used to think like, my parents are liberal, like my mom's a leftist. Like, you guys knew that America was racist and you knew that it was an imperialist nation. Like, why did you, under the Shah, come here to like study? And part of it was, there's also a question of like, well, if you come here to study, do you really ask questions about like, if I have kids, would they integrate? That's a separate issue. But even that sense of like, well, why did you want to come to what you thought was the cause of so many problems? This government that is propping up the Shah. And now I don't really think about it like that anymore, because I realized, like, yes, of course, the United States and the UK at that time were still the dominant imperial or colonial powers in the world. And so, of course, it makes sense that Iranians coming from, no shade to Canada, by the way, but like that Iranians primarily going to study at that time were going to the UK and to the United States to study, even people who were very for the revolution, because that's just where you got the best education. That's the horizon of their society. And due to the status of Iran, due to the relationships, also the expectations that people had because they were connected in this way and others to the Western world, it was necessary. And in some ways, again, very rational for even people that had valid and far-reaching critiques of the United States to still, as many still do, come to the United States to get an education. And in that way, I guess it shows how much even people like my cousin, who was born in Iran, grew up and only came to America for college. In a way, it shows that not only are Iranian Americans Americans first, but that like anybody can become an American, at least in their own mind, if they just hate the right people enough. And that it's always bothered me that Iranians are so nice to Americans, like when you go there, because it strikes me that like actually they have nothing to be thankful for, or you know, they have nothing. They have no reason to be generous with us, and they should actually be a lot more resentful.
I have one reason for that, though. There is one defense of that, which is an American who goes to Iran, unless they're a spy, and there are a lot of those, mind you, like is overcoming a certain ideological weight. Mm-hmm. So I will say that Iranians probably in some ways are leaning toward, because they're just open people also. Iranians aren't, like, we're not Zionists, right? Like, we're not racist psychopaths. Like, 1/3 of our country are like Turks. Like, it's not even even just saying that, oh, Persians are white. It's like, okay, then what are Turks? Like, what are like our other ethnic, like those are all Iranians. And so this ethno-nationalist framing around Persianness, that's an ideological tell that, oh, are you Iranian American? Are you like from a place that is built around the altar of racial supremacy? Maybe? Is that what I'm hearing in your voice? Because that is like that's a game, and specifically like in like a West Coast Iranian game. But I think over time, the growth of like the fascistic Iranian diasporoid culture goes hand in hand with, like, I tweeted about this earlier, like Ziofication of it. Because they have really like amped up the like, I hate the regime. Mm-hmm. They elevate the worst elements, like the worst people of our culture go towards Zionism, like in every country. Like, like the worst people of India go towards Zionism. Like, this is not, Zionism attracts a certain kind of character, and Iranians are like no exception to that. And you've just, the last few days when we saw, like after the martyrdom of Khamenei, you saw them in their posts and stuff before it became clear like what was happening. And ever since then, a lot of them have been quiet. A lot of them have been like trying to shamefully like, pretend like they want, but ultimately at the end of the day, like these people have fucking blood on their hands. But I would say that then there's the sort of, forget the like influencer class, because those are like tiny, but it's more that like the good Iranian Americans who like say, oh, regime bad, like they're also aware, like they're also part of this too. It's like, this is a widespread problem that affects a lot of people, that cuts across geography, class, linguistic, like it permeates academia, Iranian studies. Like it's, I don't know, maybe I was in the worst of it. So I saw like, and I'm still in the worst of it when I go to Toronto. I've seen like the two polar, like the worst ends of it, namely Southern California and Toronto, which is like, although Vancouver I'm hearing is terrible these days too. But it's more that like, yeah, we have gusanos, we have fascist part of our population. A lot of them for good reason find their way west because this is the homeland of fascism, and they find themselves, validated. So then you have this kind of selection bias or something, whatever. I always mix this up, but of like, yeah, the people here are going to be loud and angry about Islamic Republic, because for whatever reason. And it's also something that's reinforced by a Zionist media. So it's not, we are in a feedback loop of, like angry, loud, attention-seeking Iranians who are like a distinct minority, who then take over from like the much louder and much larger population of Iranians who see the in Iran, most importantly, who see the Islamic Republic as, a legitimate state that represents, poorly or otherwise, well or not well, their own national aspirations. And if anything, the fact that not only did the Iranian state fight off like a murderous psycho national terrorist attack organized by external powers, that like they themselves like gleefully, but they also have been very effectively fighting against two nuclear powers who are fighting like an illegal war that they started and now fighting back and effectively decolonizing the region. Like I think the vast majority of Iranian Americans are too stupid to really see the scale of what's going on, and the few who do are probably like shocked as to the developments. And then, because at the end of the day, like you are shielded from the news in the West. They literally block news from you. You can't go to fucking RNN, Resistance News Network, in our countries. They block you from it. They kick you off of. They kick you off of any kind of account if you don't abide by the rules. Like, this is just, we live in censorship land. Like, we are under Zionist censorship in the same way that fucking Zionist settlers are under Zionist censorship. Censorship. Like, we are not like outside of that system. So to actively go around that system, to break it, to spend the time like sort of aggregating all these different informations, filtering out the garbage bullshit. Like, this is a full-time fucking job. I can attest to it. And I'm like an amateur Iran watcher. I'm not even like a full-time Iran watcher. Like, I have friends who do this, and it's like a full-time job to follow, because there's all these circles of news that you can track. There's inside the country, outside the country. There's English, there's Persian. Like, this is a crazy news sphere. It covers probably around 100 million people in terms of linguistics, especially if you account for the fact that Persian media also goes towards Afghani people, like Afghanistan, like everywhere. So like, it's not, so this is a massive corner of the news sphere, and it's so deeply penetrated by Zionist money and like imperialist news that you can't even tell. Like, you go on Instagram, like, you are a subject of propaganda the moment you go on it. It's crazy. Maybe because I don't spend enough time on it, so I haven't like curated it as much as my Twitter say. But this is, and all of it was to lead to this moment where a disgusting, illegal, genocidal war was launched against like the sovereign country of Iran. Its leader was murdered, assassinated, breaking all kinds of rules. They've been attacking civilians since the beginning, committing all kinds of war crimes, including shocking ecological violence that's normalized here and sold back to you for clicks on like Reddit and shit. Like, this is sicko, like, American culture. I say it again for those of you who have missed it. Breaking news: American culture. America is like a sick, twisted, violent, horny circus, and it's visiting Iran right now. And it learned a lesson that it hasn't learned in many, many years. That if you fight the wrong people, if you fight people who fight back and have the tools to fight back, your racism doesn't count for much. Like, your American racism and like Zionist racism specifically took us to this project of defeating Iran. Because that's the only way I can explain it. Because if me, a fucking dipshit podcaster, knew that it was going to be a calamity, if I knew that, then they knew that, and they did it anyways. Either for one of two reasons. One is scary, one is less scary. One is they want to nuke us. That they want to like cross that threshold for it to go this bad, so that after it gets past a certain point, it gives them the permission to nuke us and to like change the region forever, which is like their dream, because as it is now, it's not going well for them. Or number two, that the people doing this are so desperate that with every day, Iran is growing more powerful. Its alliance with Russia and China has grown so powerful that every day they were losing ground. Every day the attack that they have to do gets harder and harder and costlier and costlier. So those are like the two that they had no choice in the end. So those are like the one of two options that I have to explain this insanity, because like, make it make sense, guys. Like, all of that buildup, all of that tech, all of those people, not that they care about people, they definitely care about the tech, but like all of that energy infrastructure, Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan, which has been this secret node of American control, this dirty little secret among our anarchist friends that they don't tell you about, that, oh yeah, that place that you cite as like, oh yeah, that little Rojava, I mean, I'm talking about Rojava, it's different, but Rojava too was its own project of stealing oil from the Syrian state. So these little things were protected. Erbil was protected. Rojava was protected by the reputation of the American empire, right? The feeling that, if you attack this place, if you attack these oil fields and try to take them, the American empire is coming to show up. But the American empire is already here and it's losing. So you might as well go for it. So I don't know. That's my Iran rant for now.
You jumped the question, Sina, because I was gonna set you up for that, but
What? Oh, I did.
basically, no,
That's
you're all
true.
good. But I think that's what's interesting to me right now, right? Is because we can talk about all of the, you know, the American mind and diaspora imaginations and all of this stuff, and I'm not saying it, of course, is important, but like, there's actually the war that is playing out right now, and the United States, it's difficult, right? It's difficult sifting through the fog of war. As you said, like, there's all these things you have to do to try to seek out information because the media does nothing to tell you anything about what's going on, right? But based off of what we can see right now, it seems that the United States is losing, right? That they are losing bases, personnel, ground footholds. Countries are evacuating, folks. Like, it's not going the way at all. I mean, and also, I mean, I could play a clip, but it's not going well within the Zionist entity at all right now either. And there's a lot of censorship, a lot of work that goes into still projecting this thing as like, oh, it's a little bit of a quagmire. We don't really know what way forward we're going, but we're winning. And of course, if you listen to like Hegseth or Trump, right, it's like, oh, we're winning on levels that, nobody has ever seen before, right? But like, I'm very interested, not like as just a thought exercise, but genuinely in terms of like, where does this go from here, right? Because I think, Sina, to your question around the nuclear question, I mean, I know that you're quite genuine in bringing that up, and in other chats that I'm in, like, that's something that people are very concerned about. When the United States uses a language of unconditional surrender, the last time that language was used was in Japan for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? So like, they're at least setting up the whatever, like the space, right, for that kind of discussion. And the other side of me says that, with, I know the whole like Trump always chickens out thing is like kind of a liberal meme or whatever, but there is some like reality that we've seen him, I mean, I think in the 12-day war, like, that was like, it's like, okay, we drop a couple of bombs and then say we win and leave, because they weren't going to be able to achieve what they really wanted to in that war either, right? And so they said, okay, like, we can arrange some kind of ceasefire here and like step away from this. And it wasn't even put on paper, right? It was just like, okay, we'll stop bombing each other. And with this moment that we're in, I think that that's like, ideally, in a certain way, for the US, is sort of like, how can they restore the kayfabe, right? How can they figure out to get back to like being able to claim some type of victory? And I don't know the answer, because I'm not convinced either that Iran is like rushing to reopen the Strait of Hormuz right now. I mean, maybe they are because of like China or something like that at some point, but I don't think that they're interested in doing that for the US and Israel right now. And what's coming out from them is like, we're going to keep going until you've learned your lesson. And great. I think that's good. But I don't know. I'm very like, I don't know what's going to happen at this point, because we're in a space. It's not that the US has not, of course, been unable to achieve like maximalist victory in many wars over the last like 50 years. Like, that's happened. But it's like an unconditional loss right now, it seems like. I mean, obviously they can say, okay, we killed Khamenei, his son is now in power, right? They've done nothing to change the government or the state of Iran, and they have done nothing that can diminish the capacity of Iran right now to continue to fire missiles into US bases in the region or assets in the region or the Zionist entity. So that's kind of just where I am, and I'm interested in kind of where both of you are thinking is around that. Maybe Kumars, you could jump in, because I know I ranted and you haven't spoken for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. The question of how long Iran is going to make this drag out, it seems like the sort of relevant question for approaching those two kind of alternatives. And I do get the sense, I will say that the third option could be, in terms of the Strait of Hormuz being sort of navigable for some people, there was a statement by Iranian officials, and I've seen this a few different places now, that anybody who expels their Israeli and U.S. ambassadors will, be granted safe travel. Now, you can argue about how sort of realistic this is. It's sort of almost like, when Rafael Correa told all these European countries that were worried about climate change, like, hey, pay us to keep this oil in the ground, put your money where your mouth is, and you can still help us develop our economy. And of course, it was more of a witty sort of a rhetorical move at the end of the day, because the reality is that the very few countries are going to do that. I think, sadly, including China. I will say that it's entirely possible. I'm sort of like hoping that I guess Israel chickens out in terms of not actually nuking the vast area of West Asia that would be affected by this. It wouldn't even just be Iran. That's something I'm hoping, but again, like this year especially, things have gone from inconceivable to reality in a way that even I, with my cynicism, didn't really anticipate. But setting aside that possibility, then it is a question, I think. Oops. Sorry, getting a tornado warning here.
Oh.
We are having a thunderstorm here in Pittsburgh, but that scared the shit out of me. Almost as a little reminder of what it's like to live under the threat of constant disaster and death. But luckily, we're all safe here.
It's funny. That's funny that happened to you, because exactly that scenario is what's happening in Palestine to the Zionist settlers. So like part of the calculation that Iranian planners are making here is, how do you make Zionism uncomfortable, right? How do you ruin the fun? Because they have somewhere else to go, right? Like the vast majority of them have other passports, like they have somewhere else to go. This is not, they are there by choice. This is like, they are settlers. Now, there's a feeling out there.
Sina,
I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, just let me play this clip real quick before you continue on. This is leaked footage from.
This is like a naval. This is an air base, right? Yeah, this is an air base. I think, or part of an air base, or outside of an air base. Yeah, somewhere. Maybe not an air base, in Tel Aviv. I remember seeing this, and I thought this was somewhere outside of an air base. I'm not sure, but they wouldn't have cameras there if it was. So I guess it's probably. So part of the calculation, yeah, like this is not like they've never experienced something like this. Like this is not supposed to happen to them, right? Because remember, like before anything else, their supremacist worldview is what dictates their logic, right? That we are better than these people. We are better than our enemies. Our enemies are Amalek. They are genetically inferior to us. Which is what racism, right? Like the postulation of racism means that like your inner core is better, is superior than somebody else's inner core. So to see that happen to them, to experience what people under them have experienced at their hands, is a profound trauma that they can't just simply recover from. Because just like the Gulf, which I will say now, and maybe I'll be wrong, but I don't think I am, the U.S. is never getting back the Persian Gulf. Okay, that's my 2 hours into this episode for you freaks who are still here. You get Sina Rahmani's lock of the week, geopolitical lock of the week, which is like the Gulf is never recovering. What it was will never be again, because that had like the Hogwarts bubble around it, and now Iranians with 32,000 drones just like plucked it away from safety and doesn't exist. And so like who is going to tell you, like who is going to protect you from the much larger country in the region, like the very large country? And remember, Iran itself is just one country, right? There's also the millions of Iraqis who are loyal to the Iranian resistance. Millions, okay? How many millions? Okay, we can argue about it, but it's a lot. And especially, I'm not saying that all Shia feel this way. Yeah, exactly. Like, that all Shia feel this way. But there is a large contingent of Shia who look upon what's this violence that's been happening as like, yeah, okay, I guess our books were right. I guess we do face this kind of Yazid character. Like, I guess so. Like, you've inspired a lot of resistance to you, not just around, but like around the whole region. And on top of that, how will the U.S. rebuild what it's lost? It can't. And how, let's say if it did, how is it going to move into the region? Politely? Like politely just, this morning there were tankers that tried to skimp through, right? Like, and they got hit. So it's not, a tanker, like it was like 3 of them. One was Israeli owned or something, and it was like flying a Liberian flag or something. I don't remember, but like that is an articulation of supremacy, of like, oh, we're smarter than you. Just watch us like get a piece of cheese by this mouse, like, you know. But guess what happened? Like Iranians don't need to mine it; they can just hit it with missiles. Like Iran made its bet on missiles, and that bet is paying off. Let's put it in crude American polymarket terms, but like that bet is putting off, because what could you do? You could be like the Gulf, right? Like this is 2 models of sovereignty. Become a subcontractor, or become a subcontractor to the U.S. empire in terms of security. Buy from them, buy their expensive garbage tech from them, which they'll take away from you or not really use to protect you, and live under their boot. Or develop your own homegrown systems, which you can make yourself and not have to pay exorbitant fees. But of course, you have to deal with the fact that, you know, Uncle Sam will be at your throat, and you'll be pushed out of the economic system, and you'll be sanctioned to all hell, and your people will be, you know, insulted, and everything you do will be scrutinized, and they'll raise an army of compradors and blah, 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 blah. So like this moment we're in is truly foundational. There is an axis, all the cliche, like all the multipolaristos and polaristas. Like I know there's a lot of like, whatever, Russia, China, but truly, whatever you want to say about Russia and China, whatever duplicitous role you see them playing in the entity in Palestine, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I don't necessarily disagree with, but that's another conversation. But at the very same time, you have to remember all 3 of those countries are all victimized by the same U.S. empire. Okay, so whatever, we can dance around the specifics of how they navigate the entity and their foreign policy, but these 3 parties have all been aggrieved in their own ways. And these 3 parties represent 3 of like the 4 top basically resistant militaries to the U.S. Imperium, the 4th being North Korea, DPRK, I would say. My brain isn't coming up with any other like militaries right now that are like actually resistant to the U.S. I can't think of any. So that to me is that this is something deeper, that like the axis of the world is shifting. And if anything, Iran is like in like a Kramer versus Kramer battle with like these 2 world systems, and like the Westoids like are trying to keep Iran like, and which they've been trying. It's like, no, come back to us by like, you know, ripping off its fucking arms and like just, you know, yanking us away. Whereas like this other faction in the world, which basically has left Iranians no choice because you've been pushed out of there, that you've been pushed out of that system. So yeah. So now I heard this morning, I don't know if it's true. I didn't check if it's true, but I heard that Iranians aren't partaking in World Cup. That's what I heard. I don't know if that's true. Maybe maybe it can be confirmed or not, which is like painful to Iranians, to like tens of millions of Iranians. That's a very painful, if true, it's a bitter poison pill, but I get it. Like why be part of the Westoid system? Why do it? When they treat you like this, why keep going back for the abuse?
It seems to be confirmed, Sina. It's like in multiple news outlets that one of their ministers said that they're not going to participate in it. Yeah.
Fucking shame, man.
This was the principled move anyway, frankly,
it's
because the
necessary.
fans weren't going to be allowed in due to the travel restrictions. Like there's a handful of
Yeah, that's
countries
true.
that were on that list that the Trump administration put out that are also in the World Cup. So in some ways, the humiliation was already kind of piling on there, and this seems like a principled thing to do. I would say that I pretty much agree with Sina's assessment of, like, I think that the option that is more, to me right now, more likely than nuclear strike on Iran is that the West Asian countries are finally being decolonized in a way that I think represents the lesson of, and maybe the culmination of, what began on October 7th. And this idea that you mentioned, Jared, that these attacks have revealed, and I think, Sina, you made this point too, that these attacks have basically shattered the invincibility of the United States in that region, and the illusion that it's so dominant that it can protect you, that it can defeat any opponent. And that was shattered already for Israel with October 7th and with their failed campaign to eradicate Hamas. And to me, I think about, the martyrdom of Yahya Sinwar, and now of Sayyid Ali Khamenei in a similar way, that since it's like, along with the idea that Israel, that settler colonialism, that imperialist control of the region is inevitable, and that it is absolute, that Israel is a normal country where you can be safe. With that illusion, I think also went the illusion that decolonization is somehow over, that it's not just an incomplete process, but something that truly could become more dynamic again. And if this is the fulfillment of the broader project of decolonization, then you also have to admit that this is also very literally, according to the founding principles of the Islamic Republic, the completion of the Islamic Revolution, that the telos of the Islamic Revolution in Iran was the decolonization of the region, for which, of course, the liberation of Palestine and of Jerusalem sort of metonymically stands, and there's always been a very explicit sort of a goal. So to me, I think that the question you pose about what happens if the US sort of chickens out first, or if the US or Israel decide we can't take this anymore, maybe they try to spin it, right? And to bring it back to the idea of kayfabe, sometimes the lesson to learn in terms of not being a mark yourself is to not fall for this idea that, like, oh, we made a mistake, that there was a strategic blunder, which is what they used to call Iraq, and they're presumably going to start calling it using that term to refer to this in liberal media, and Democrats will call it that. But that idea that this is all spontaneous, and because Trump is like confused or something, is something that we have to reject or be able to see through as kayfabe. There's going to be stories that say, oh, they didn't know about this, they didn't think about this. they thought this would happen. They didn't think it would get this far. I don't think that any of that is true necessarily. I think we have to be skeptical of the idea that this is not all very well planned out. However, that means something very different for the scenario in which they do eventually give up, because that will mean that they actually did, and I agree with Sina on this too, sort of recognize that their time is running out, that there's a point at which Russia and China and this new order are going to become too powerful. We're in that kind of liminal space, I think, right now, where it wasn't clear whether it was already past the point of no return, whether Iran was no longer going to be able to sort of be attacked without more explicit support from Russia and China. I think China especially has done all that they can given their governing and foreign policy philosophy. I'm not ruling out that they could get more involved when things get more intense, especially if there's the threat of nuclear war. But I do think that the answer to this is that if the US loses, it will be because they made a calculated decision that this was the last time that they could militarily defeat Iran, and they are already too late. And that the same way that Iran's government, even I do it, see? The same way that the government falling would probably knock China off of their trajectory in terms of becoming a sort of if not a global hegemon, then a sort of a responsible steward of the new global order. Probably it would knock their timeline off by, I don't know, another 50 years. That's how important I think Iran is to that plan. And I think the same way that that's true, a conclusive, if not victory for Iran, but at least a conclusive failure on the part of the United States to attain any of their objectives or Israel's objectives would kind of mean the dawn of a new era, or maybe it's a new era that started already with October 7th. This idea that we're not just going to sit around and wait for 2080 or whatever for the United States to, not be powerful enough to push people around. Maybe all of this had to happen the way that it did, and it was always going to feel like it happened too soon before we were really ready to fight back. Maybe that's always how it was going to feel, especially while the window of opportunity on the other side, on the side of the imperialists, does appear so clearly to be closing. It was always going to be an edge case like this. I have faith, I guess, on some level, that what we are witnessing is the culmination of a great advance in the decolonization of the region.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's awesome. I appreciate it. I think we should wind it down there, because that's a really good place for us to end it. And if I go more, then we'll start we'll fuck up the good vibes right now. So thank you, Kumars, for joining us for this episode on Kayfabe. Sina, thank you for co-streaming, co-hosting, and coming up with the idea here. So people, please check out, support, delete your account, check out East is a Podcast. I know you all do. And tomorrow on Millennials, we have Patrick Bresnahan and Patrick Brody going to come through to talk about how Ireland has become basically like a sub component of empire, and it's that way because it hosts all the data centers for fucking Amazon and Microsoft and everything else. And so we'll be talking about basically eco-socialism and anti-imperialism in how bad fucking AI is and all that shit. So anyway, and it'll also get into why Ireland can pass resolutions in solidarity with Palestine but doesn't actually actualize them because it materially doesn't really work out within their economy.
The answer is kayfabe.
So, all right. All right.
All right. Thank you, Jared. Thanks, Sina.
Thank you.